I met you at a tech conference. I don't know how many years ago. Tech Table, right? Is that what it was? You
I
were,
think
and you
so.
had a different company. You had a language company like ESL, like ESL training. I think it was pre-COVID.
Probably.
Yes, it was
Yeah.
pre-COVID. COVID hadn't hit yet, and you were just doing this sort of ESL product for restaurants. I think you were doing it at Gramercy, maybe some other places.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, Tell me a little about that because I remember some of it, but I don't remember exactly how it started. Or
Yeah. So I spent 13 years in restaurants. And so this was sort of a known problem for me, which is that sometimes up to 30, sometimes 50% of your workforce doesn't speak English as their first language. And that causes pretty severe communication breakdowns on top of lack of mobility in the workplace. So I got my certification to teach English as a second language. And, long story short, developed this product that delivered English language training to employee cell phones. It was all work relevant. It was micro training, so it wasn't disruptive in the workplace. And it was really successful, but it was only in restaurants and it was a very small market that we were targeting. And the vision was always, how do we go beyond this to impact all 110 million Americans who aren't sitting at a desk all day? So, if you really tell the full story of Opus, the origins were in this like 7 years ago ESL
Mhm.
product from my first company.
Just to like wind it back a little bit,
Yeah,
you were in restaurants before that,
yeah,
um, but were you doing something before restaurants?
bakeries.
So
I
basically,
was
still
always in
that.
the food industry. It was the same
Yeah.
shit. Yeah, so I grew up in bakeries. That's where my mom worked. She just retired last year. My
Wow.
grandfather owned Don's World of Beef, which was the first Arby's competitor in Kansas City back in the 60s.
Wait, when did Arby's open?
Uh, Pretty long ago. I think
Before
I don't.
Don's World of Beef?
Yeah. So
Wow, I didn't
Arby's,
know that.
they actually like gave early Arby's, like a run for their money, as family lore says. But then, of course, Arby's won. But yeah, it was roast beef sandwiches and pie. And it was sort of one of the first quick serve concepts in Kansas City. And very well known, even to this day, if you're in Kansas City and you're talking to somebody who's, older than 60, they'll remember Don's. But this was what I grew up with, was stories of my family, you know, very fondly talking about working in the industry and how much it taught them. And so it was sort of a no-brainer that would be my first job. My first job was like, I was 15 scooping ice cream. And then I worked where my mom worked. I learned how to serve there. I worked back of house there. And that job really held me through high school and college. They introduced me, I was like shipping manager there. I kind of did everything at this like Kansas City institution. And then when I moved when I moved to Charleston for college, I was truthfully for 4 years, I was just working at like burn and turn tourist restaurants, just trying to make as much cash as I could to pay for school and pay for my life there. It was really when I moved to New York 15 years ago. Is it 15 years now? I moved here in 2010. Yeah, where I really started my professional career in the industry. And because I'd had so much background in bakeries, that's where I started. Um,
Yeah. Why'd
so
you
I
come to
was
New
in
York?
bakeries. Oh, because Charleston is a very small town. And I wanted to change the world. And at that point, I wanted to study linguistics because I had a passion for language. I still do. And I just knew I couldn't do it in the South, to be honest.
Yeah.
Um, but when I got here, I have a tendency, maybe it's like a founder startup, a founder mentality, you can relate to like when I make a decision, I want to move really fast on it. It might take me a minute to get there, but so like the second I knew I wanted to move into New York, I was gone with no job. I had no job in New York. So I
Wow.
like
See, I
moved
don't
in with
have
a
that
friend.
mentality.
What?
I don't like
Yeah.
I'm the opposite. I have to know that like I have to be so sure that like I can do this thing, and I'll tell lots of people first and make sure I'm like
Oh, really?
Yeah, I don't spend like a lot of time on it, but like even just this podcast, I was pretty sure I wanted to do a podcast, but I needed to spend some time like thinking about like, could I actually consistently do this all the time for the next 5, 10 years and enjoy it? And then I spent all this time thinking about, okay, well, what would be the ROI for the company? How would I just split my time between this and working through all that as opposed to just starting, which is probably a bad idea, but it ended up being, I think it was actually the right idea in the long run. But I'm envious of when you just can just on a whim just decide to do something and get up and leave.
Well, it has its trade-offs, but that's generally how I tend to operate. And I think it served me well, but I don't think there's any right or wrong way to walk through the world. It was just at that point, I knew I needed to get out. And so when I got to New York, I started working in bakeries again and kind of worked my way up. So, my last job was before I switched to fine dining at Union Square Hospitality Group, was in baking manufacturing. So I was working in facilities there. I was helping them run third-party audits with, big food safety providers, which is where I got a lot of my ops chops, to be honest. When you're trying to sell 10,000 tortillas a year to like major food chains, you figure out fast, like how to prioritize the needs of the business. So yeah, I would actually say I have way more experience in baking and manufacturing than I do in fine dining. I was really only in fine dining for like, you know, 2, 3 years, but I brought a lot of those learnings over. I mean, this, it's like to be good at the industry, you have to be good at hospitality. You don't have to be good at the style of service. You can learn the style of service. I was just thinking about this the other day. This is a bit tangential, but I was thinking about how when I first started working at USHG, I learned all these, like Danny Meyer's core principles and all of that. And at the time I thought, oh God, this is so corny. Who is ever going to do this? And I was like, I just need to move fast. And I remember sitting down with Mike Anthony at Gramercy Tavern, who and I think we were hiring for some position. And someone had referred someone over. So let's say like Judy referred Mike, and we ended up not hiring Mike. And I remember, sorry, that was confusing because there's two mics now.
Yes,
but Chef told me,
I got you.
Chef was just like, make sure that you give Mike feedback on why he didn't get the job. And I said, okay. And he said, and make sure you send a thoughtful thank you note to Judy explaining as well why Mike didn't get the job. And I remember the time, because I had hired hundreds of people before, thinking, I've never done that before.
Yeah.
And it left a real mark on me. And it's a mark of professionalism, but also just like extending your hospitality to everyone in your universe, whether you're serving them food or giving them feedback. And I think that's a lot of the principles we carry today at Opus, is just going the extra mile to make sure that everyone feels like they're a part of the process,
Yeah. Yeah. And then just being thoughtful. What's funny? I have this thing that's been bubbling up for me lately that keeps popping up, independent of hospitality, but just in terms of like, being a creative and becoming excellent at a craft. Because I grew up in kitchens cooking for, 15 years in these fine dining restaurants, and you spend a lot of time learning and you're making the same thing thousands of times, and you have to, perfect each of these techniques. And then, 15 years later, okay, now I'm going to do a restaurant. I interviewed Brian and Jacqueline, who were the founders of this ice cream shop called Ample Hills a couple weeks ago, and fucking love Ample Hills.
Yeah,
ice
it's amazing.
Ridiculously good.
There's two down the street from us.
It's so good. And I went to their home actually in Brooklyn, and he was making food for a new concept he was working on. He's making these chicken wings, making these chicken burgers, and they were so good, like really good. And I realized, like, man, to make really great food or great art or great music, whatever, I think the common denominator is curiosity. I know this sounds cheesy to say this, but Brian is not a professional chef. He never really, trained in any of these things, but he was so curious about, starting with ice cream, about everything that had to do with ice cream and the fat content and the sugar content and where, every element of it. And his curiosity led to just creating some of the best ice cream in the world, certainly that I've ever had. And now he's doing it again. And, he's not a expert in, creating sort of fast casual food that is delicious, but like the things he's making were just, I was like, wow, I'm so impressed. He's got like the way he makes the chicken burger. I won't go into all the details, but it's really, really unique and smart and delicious. And I'm like, yeah, not a chef, not trained for 15 years, but really curious. And I'm like at the tail end of the finishing, I've been like plowing through all of Walter Isaacson's books, and I'm at the tail end of finishing Leonardo da Vinci's book. And same thing, not classically trained in anything, like admittedly, and almost like boasts that he is not a learned person and didn't go to academics and schools and things like that. But so curious, like obsessively curious about things, and that's how he was able to understand mathematics at this incredible level, and geometry and science and art and it was all just because he was so obsessively curious about it. I'm bringing this up also because I want to talk about learning with you, but it does seem like the most important thing if you want to really learn and be incredible at something is a deep sense of curiosity. And of course that means you have to be like really passionate about something, but it's just so funny how in the last like 2 months, these things keep popping up. Like, wow, like curiosity thing is really, really important. So I'll segue this to Opus because I want to talk to you about learning and how people learn and what you've learned about how people ingest information and not only like retain information, but actually absorb it. But let's start with microlearning because what is that?
Oh, it's an overused term. If you ask me what trends in learning today I think are overused, it's that one because it's too much of a blanket statement these days. And I think like blended learning is really what we should be talking about. But if you think about just kind of the word itself, microlearning is small moments of ingesting knowledge. But there's lots of ways that you can do that. I think that the way that people perceive microtraining is that, you learn 3 minutes a day and then you move on. But what microlearning actually is the process of learning. Microlearning is actually about the spectrum of learning and, to use your word, like ingesting information over time in order to create mastery. So that's how I would define microlearning versus the learn 3 facts every day, or, it requires a much deeper level of commitment and coaching in order to develop mastery, which I know we'll get into probably. But anyway, that's sort of the basic definition of microlearning.
It's probably, I'm sure, evolved since we spoke last. So can you maybe just talk a little bit about what is Opus and how is it, used in restaurants?
Yeah, so Opus is a training operating system that's designed for businesses with a frontline workforce. So we work with a ton of restaurant groups. As you know, Josh, that's how we met. It's where my background is. It's, the second largest employer in the United States. So it's an important market, especially because it's a traditional market, and it's one where entrants, people who are entering the industry, are unskilled. So what we do at Opus is we help employees across the life cycle, whether it's a new hire or someone who's leveling up or someone who's just trying to learn how to cook, the new steak burger in the back. We deliver training to them on their mobile phone in 130 global languages. But what really makes Opus special beyond that component is that the way that it's delivered is in sort of a TikTok style learning experience, which sadly is the way that we all consume content now. And then on top of that, what we layer onto Opus is a skill validation feature. So you worked in kitchens, you know this, like no cook is going to stand and like do 5 minutes of watching a video and then completely know how to make the steak burger after that. You need a chef to coach you. You need someone to say, that's right, that's wrong. So we have a skill validation feature that allows a manager to coach that employee and leave record and pass them or not on how well they're achieving that skill.
So this is the blended learning.
This is really what blended learning is. And this is why we went beyond microlearning to say, how can we actually get to the knowledge retention that's required in order to develop skills thoughtfully throughout your employee life cycle?
That's great.
Yeah.
You know, I am actually curious. I don't know if you use Opus internally with your team to train your team. You do. How does that work? What are they doing? What are they doing internally?
It depends. I think we use it with our sales team. It's a little bit different for us because we're desk workers, right? So Opus is really designed for teams that are standing on their feet all day. You know, we have tablet capabilities. So, you know, we work with like Blaze Pizza and Smashburger, and they have tablets in the, I know you guys work with tablets too. They have tablets in the kitchen where people can reference resources. They can scan a QR code on their KDS and they can pull up a training. They can complete task management on there. So that's really kind of like the core experience. But at Opus, you know, you have to drink your own champagne to know if it's working. So we try to incorporate
I like
it when
that you said
can.
champagne. Drink your own.
Instead of dog fooding it. Yeah. You know, like at the end of the year, we have the whole team go through the product and we'll create an assignment, like a training assignment that's on like how we did over the past year to team. What did we achieve? And we'll add quizzes to it and we'll talk about it. So the way that we use it is actually as a synchronous learning tool. You can use Opus in two different ways. You can use it asynchronously. So people learning at their own speed, you know, their own learning style. Some people like text to speech. So they like to listen to their training like it's a podcast. Other people like to read, watch videos. We do it synchronously, much like restaurants use it for new hire training. You have 30 new hires in a restaurant, they're all going to learn at the same time. So it's sort of like a Kahoot style learning experience if you're familiar with that platform.
Yeah. No, that's great. I love the ability to be synchronous or asynchronous.
Yeah, you should be. It's fun. You can talk and exchange. We work with a company called El Torito out west, and I visited them a few weeks back, and it was so interesting. So I was talking with the GM there, and I was like, "How do you know, how's your front of house team learning?" And she said, "You know, it's what you would expect. It's like they clock in, they do a little bit of learning, and then they apply that learning at work." I said, "That makes sense." I said, "What about your back of house team? Because it's a scratch kitchen." And she said, "Come with me." So she takes me into what they call the fountain room, which is like their really beautiful atrium. And she goes, "That's the Opus table." And I would talk to some of the cooks back there, and they would talk about how when they use Opus, they go to class and they learn together. These are all Spanish-speaking individuals. They were uncomfortable learning independently. They wanted to learn as a group. So it has this way of creating a learning culture that people really cling to because it can accommodate different learning styles, which is really important to us. That being accessible, frankly, is not just about language. That's how we started, right? That's our roots, and we're really good at it. Don't get me wrong, but access means so many other things. And there's so much minutia involved in how we learn. You know, like you're talking about how you're reading. I love to read too. I wish I did it more. That's usually the way I consume content. I do not like podcasts. I know I'm on one right now. But I don't like listening. It's not like I listen every day. I don't like listening to news or media. I like reading it. My partner listens to the radio. So I'm saying all of this because like a big part of learning is about personalization. And I don't think that there's enough products out there today that are making an effort to do that.
Yeah, I would agree. I'm sort of the same. I actually do like podcasts. I can't stand Audible. You know, I mean, I listen to podcasts at like 2x speed.
Yeah.
And that's the only way I can really listen. People sound smarter, by the way, when you
when you
double the
2x,
speed.
Yeah.
It is interesting how everybody retains information and then sort of learns things a different way. I was at my kids' school this morning. They had a sing along, which was fucking cutest thing ever. Like these little 5-year-olds singing Guns N' Roses and things like that, and leather jackets. And I remembered that age, and I remembered learning the song that was the 50 United States. There was a song that
I learned that song too.
Alabama, Alaska,
Arizona, Arkansas.
And I can say all 50 states in alphabetical order only because of that song. And I'm like, that is crazy. There's also a president rap, by the way. I don't know if you did learn the president
I don't
rap.
know that one, no. But do you know the Canterbury Tales in Old English?
No.
Yeah, we had to memorize that one too.
But it's funny how when you learn something, but then there's some sort of level of application to your life, it's so much more, there's so much more that's retained, And if you just read something, you can memorize something and then the next day forget it. And when you apply it to something you enjoy or something that's fun or something that's at work, it's just crazy how much more you can actually retain. And that's why I love cooking, obviously, because I'm a big believer in just in time versus just in case information. And even if you're going to read, if you read a book about, starting a business and you don't plan to start a business for like 5 years, kind of a waste of time, because you want to be learning stuff that you can apply that day or the next day. And it's the same thing if you're going to be, if you're starting a restaurant and they're going to talk to you all, about how, whatever, all of the ingredients of the salad, and you're not going to touch that salad for like 3 months or like 3 weeks. It's kind of pointless, especially if you're not going to go make that salad.
I feel like you need to talk to restaurant owners, though, because I still feel like that's not the mentality today. There's still this huge misconception that everything needs to be learned up front in order for a new hire to be certified in a role. And I agree with you. It's like, it's just a waste of time and labor to do that. Pick the highest priority things and move on.
Yeah,
but I think that's old school, right? Like that's what we used to do, is throw someone to the fire and to the wolves and say, like, you got to learn it all. And then it sort of evolved into, oh, let's make these paper packets that are 100 pages and you should read all of it and sign it and like sit down with your manager and talk through it.
Yeah.
And
it's such a waste. I mean,
it's a waste of time and money.
By the way, any document, I hate like documents. So I'm glad you spent all that time on that thing that no one's ever going to read. And if they did, they won't remember it.
Exactly.
Like when you do something in the moment, that's when you remember it. And for me, even if I'm reading, it's funny. I interviewed this guest. She's in this sort of CEO group that I'm a part of. Her name's Ellen Cassidy, and she was brilliant. I heard her talking because I sent this note to this CEO group and I asked them, like, hey, how does everybody retain information? I hate that I like read books and I have to reread them like 30 times because I'll forget things from the book. And she jumped in, and basically she has a company that teaches people how to pass the LSAT. But really what she does is she teaches you how to retain information. And there's this whole process of, you read something and then you translate it into your own words and then you say a quip about it. So I'm going to, on the spot, might be difficult for me to come up with an example, but let's just say I'm reading about Opus, and then I could say, oh, Opus, it's a training tool that's digitally powered for restaurants. Opus reminds me of and so you translate it in your own words, and then you come up with sort of an analogy or some sort of quip. And what it really is just sort of, applying it somehow to yourself. And I think I don't know if we really can truly learn things unless we also selfishly apply them to something that actually matters to us.
Yeah.
Otherwise, all you're really doing is memorizing things. And then, I'm sure you've heard Einstein. It's like, he's like, I don't memorize anything. What's the point?
Yeah.
If I have to memorize
it's not memorizing, it's cramming. That's what you're describing.
Yeah, exactly. So do you have any sort of like, first principles or heuristics around how you deploy your product in a way that it is not just, like retaining, but actually comprehending this information?
Yeah. I think to start, it's important to reframe how you think about training. Training is a spectrum. So it, oftentimes starts with a reference or a resource where you're presenting what is about to be learned. Or maybe I should back up. Like before that, you have to know what the goal is, right? So when we do a lot of internal training at Opus, and a lot of what we tell our customers to be thinking about is, if you're deploying a video, you should be telling the watcher, the viewer, what to look for in that video. Don't just throw it in front of them. Say, hey, listen for when, David says this, and look for what happens when like you don't put, the garnish on the guacamole and how the customer reacted. Goal setting is a huge part of knowledge retention. And I think it's often forgotten because to your point, like, 80 to 90% of that information is going to leak out. The human brain only remembers about 3 core pieces of information for every 90 minutes of learning. So you better make that clear what people are expected to learn. 2 is actually presenting a proper resource. So that could be, like a recipe. It could be a video or what have you. Let's say that it's the use case of like learning how to make fries. In that case, it might be a recipe, and it might be how to turn on the fryer. Beyond that, it's this interactive component. So you and I have talked about this before. It's like what's really missing from learning today is this kind of interactive piece. People have wrongly perceived video as interactive. Video is not interactive. Video is one-sided. I would even argue that like drag and drop, like put the fries in the fryer, on your screen is not truly interactive either.
Does that happen? Is that a thing?
Yeah.
I would love to see that.
Yeah. And listen, like it's fine. I think it's closer to what needs to happen. But yeah, there's lots of stuff. That's fine, but that's actually not the end of it. So we do a learning style that most people can relate to, which is these sort of moments of learning. It's very similar to social media and kind of scrolling. So people are familiar with that. They don't have to learn how to do it. It's image-based. So if folks, can't read that well or don't want to read, then they can, even a GIF could teach them something. It ends with an assessment. You have to, that's sort of the next layer of the spectrum is how much did you actually remember in this past moment? And did you remember the important things I asked you to remember? And then it can't end there. So true retention happens when you're applying skill and then behavior changes. So the application of the skill is really, you're coaching me as a manager. Hey, like I'm going to watch you make those fries, then I'm going to taste them. I'm going to give you a second evaluation to make sure that it's the way that I expect it to be. Well, that's the application component of it. But what a lot of people forget is, did I actually change your behavior? Can you go back independently and make those fries without supervision and then teach someone else? So that's sort of like the top of the pyramid that gets overlooked in restaurants. And it's why most restaurants are training their people over and over and over again. It's why people leave their jobs because they don't feel like they're skilled at anything. But when you feel skilled, it's like why you were emailing all those CEOs and you were like, I want to feel like I'm remembering something. It's because, well, maybe in some of those readings, like you're not applying those skills yet.
That's right.
And like, that's okay. I love rereading books because I learn something new from it each time that's relevant to the life that I'm leading today. It's what they say that you should reread Catcher in the Rye every 10 years for the same reason that it applies differently.
You reread any books?
Catcher in the Rye.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And then usually my favorite book is The Heart is a Lonely Hunter. And I usually find myself rereading that every few years because I think it's just a beautiful book. I'm more of like a novel reader than a nonfiction reader.
Yeah. I reread Siddhartha every year. I've reread it every year for 25 years now.
Yeah.
And it never gets old.
There's just some books that, I love sci-fi, but I can like pick up and put down a Michael Crichton anytime I'm good. Because it's fun and it's easy and it's a way to turn off. But really the books that impact you, yeah.
Yeah, I have a hard time with fiction books, but I've started because I think there's still things you can learn from it.
Yeah.
So you have all of this sort of content that you are like, helping people to train better. I'm sure you're probably also helping them to create content. But if you had to give some mandatory things that every restaurant, operator or their team has to train on, to sort of pass your gold standard of running a restaurant. Like, are there a few things that like either that you've seen as sort of common threads that like really great restaurants are sort of creating modules for, or I don't know if that's the right word, or that you think like, hey, I would make sure everybody does this, and we can't do the compliant things like obviously sexual harassment.
Whatever.
We have to do that.
Those are there and we do them, but like that's not the core business of anybody, of any of us, right? It's the requirement. I can think of two things. So you're asking about, what are the things that every restaurateur should be remembering, especially when it comes to training? Number one is don't let perfect be the enemy of progress. So I was just thinking about this last night, Josh. The amount of times I see businesses just totally stall on their training because the CEO wants to make it perfect and needs to review it 10 times before it goes out to the team. Your business is changing every month. Your training should change every month. And so if you expect that to be perfect, it's never going to be released. Hell's going to freeze over. So that's why we've used so much AI tooling to help with like iteration and development. Most of the time, most of our customers are teams of one. And these are big brands that are deploying lots of training to lots of different franchise brands, et cetera. But, the admin overhead cannot go up as your business scales. Like that's,
Yeah.
oftentimes what happens in restaurants. So anyway, I think the AI helps with that and helps people understand that like, this doesn't have to be perfect. It needs to be good enough so that your team can give you feedback. And then you can move on.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I don't know if SOPs are the same in the same world, but like I always find myself telling the team, like, look, it doesn't matter if you spent, 5, 100 hours on this, on building this, or 5 hours. If people aren't able to follow this process, then it's not a good process.
Exactly.
It doesn't matter. Like I think so often people like they want to dial in every little detail of how this works, and you do this, and if this happens, and you do this, and if this happens, and if you do this. And I appreciate the detail orientation of that, but if people can't follow it and they're not following it, who cares?
Forget it.
It's basically just another archive that will live somewhere that, and that happens so often. There's cool tools that I like. And if you ever use Scribe AI, it's really cool. It basically follows you along the browser, and as you do things, it will sort of mark each button you
cool.
push, and it will sort of document that what you wrote or what you did. And I find like if I'm training somebody, and whether it's like a team member or like training my assistant or something, I use Loom.
Same.
And I'll just turn it on and just start doing whatever I'm doing, and I'll talk about what I'm doing, and they can hear the context of my thoughts, and I'll use Scribe so like they're actually seeing exactly what I'm pressing, and then they can decide how they want to go about it. But I do believe that like one of the biggest setbacks of teaching and also decision making is not really understanding context.
Yeah.
And I think that's like so often it happens in the kitchens. I know as a chef, it's always happened where someone teaches you how to do something, but you don't know why.
Yeah.
And you don't know why that works or doesn't work the way it works. You don't know why they started it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I do this with my team members where like we do this thing called Unity, where essentially like I want them to make their own decisions. And especially if you're new and you're just starting, and Unity is a military tactic, essentially means, unless otherwise directed. So tell me the decision you're going to make. And if you don't hear back from me in this case, say it's 24 hours, then, or if it's a decision, these parameters, you just go ahead. But I often ask as a response to just like, tell me your context level. And I created sort of these 4 context levels, level 1, 2, 3, and 4. And level 1 is you have no context. You have absolutely nothing. It's like a chef going into a new restaurant and then day 1 changes the entire menu. And he doesn't know the team. He doesn't know why the stations are set up the way they are. He doesn't know and he just changes the menu. Terrible idea, by the way.
Yeah.
That's an L1, right? And then L2 is you have like some context. Obviously it goes up from there, but the amount of context you have really is a big determinant of how good of a decision you can make and how well you can learn something. And I think that's probably more important when teaching things than the actual way that you deliver it, is like them understanding why this is important.
Yeah.
And why they're really even learning it in the first place. Even sexual harassment, like it's a chore to have to do that thing, and everybody has to do it by law. And everybody just does it, right? And this is maybe a bad example, but like maybe explain why. Why does we have to do it this way? What's the history of it?
To actually get people to like prevent it. It's called sexual harassment prevention. And so it's about teaching people the core principles of how to recognize it and how to stop it. And so I totally agree. You know, when I first started Opus 4 years ago, and we would get on calls with customers, there's like 7 core use cases that we support.
That's a lot.
And I would get on calls, and you can go to our website and you can see the word frontline everywhere. Frontline training, like we're not hiding who we serve. And people would get on the call and I'd say, well, who's your highest priority right now? They'd say the managers. And I'd say, well, we're a product for your frontline. So, we can help your managers. We have an app dedicated for them so they can track their team. But like we really just starting with, your 13 managers instead of your 3,000 employees is probably not the best way to go. And I was just realizing how I remember the moment when I realized that what they were actually asking for was train my managers how to be better trainers. And it's really that kind of train the trainer use case that I think a lot of restaurants don't know how to talk about. They're like, just train my managers. But what they're actually asking for is teach my managers how to be better teachers.
Mm-hmm.
And so, to sort of go back to what you were talking about originally, which is, what's my advice on how to make training better, or what are the core principles? It's recognize that managers and trainers are not the same thing, that not every manager is a great trainer, and know how to talk about that with your team. And don't just blanket call manager training, like identify what the issues are and start small, because even manager training should be delivered in small bites too. They're people too.
Yeah. Absolutely. What do you do when this is independent of training, just, you're a founder, I'm a founder. We have a lot of decisions we have to make. Sometimes they're really hard. Usually we fuck them up. Sometimes we don't. What do you do when you're feeling like really stuck? Like you just don't know like what the right next move is?
It depends on the type of decision I need to make, but it usually comes down to the 80-20 rule, which is like gather as much information as you can, and then 20% of it just has to be gut. I never strive for 100%. And usually when I'm stuck, it's because I'm unknowingly striving for 100. So sometimes to kick me out of that, it's a conversation with someone who I trust, an advisor.
Did you say 20% gut?
Yeah.
Oh, I wouldn't think that of you.
What do you mean?
Like I would think you would use a lot more of your gut intuition for decisions.
I make pretty well-informed decisions, but I just operate fast and expect other people to. So it seems like it's like impulsive, but very rarely is it impulsive. Yeah.
I don't know if you have this problem, because I've had it in the past, and now I have to be very explicit. I spend a lot of time thinking through big decisions, and I like to understand it, all the context as much as possible, and walk through different scenarios, and make sure that like I'm thinking through the downstream effect of this thing.
Sure.
A year from now. For big decisions, not for small ones. Like it's pretty binary actually. It's like there's a lot of decisions where I don't want to
make that decision.
Like,
yeah.
That's why you have an executive team. You make the decision. Here's our first principles. Just go for it. But for the big decisions, I spend a lot of time. But they come off to my team oftentimes like they're on a whim. I realize part of it is I'm doing it myself. I'm trying to not insert too much pressure of like, hey, this is exactly what it's going to be. I want to sort of like create more sense of like collaboration. And I realized it actually was doing a disservice to everyone, including me. Whereas I should have just, I'm a lot more clear now. Like, hey, this is a decision versus this is a discussion. Because oftentimes they'd be like, oh, here's Josh with another like crazy idea, not knowing that I spent like, weeks on this thing and speaking to every expert I know. And I found that like, it's really important, like communicating, even just the context of like, of when you make a decision at least as a leader, like when this is a decision versus a discussion, because I don't think people know unless you make that clear.
I actually relate to the decision-making too, though, where, I'm fast, but I oftentimes don't let people in on my process. And it's something that I'm working on because you have a stronger executive team when you're letting people in. And one thing an investor always used to say that I stole, early when I started the business, is I'd want to get everything perfect for the board meeting and all of that. He's like, just give me the C+ version. Just give me the C+ version and we can take it from there. But if you don't release it into the wild, it's going to get stuck in your head. So that's what the team knows about me, is that I'll give a grade and I expect them to give me a grade. Hey, I'm giving you like the B+ version of this. Bear with me. Or, hey, I spent a lot of time on this. I'm giving you the A-. So not much is going to change to get this to A or A+, but it helps us communicate better internally to know where someone's at on that timeline. Knowing that you're starting with F,
Yeah, no, it's great. I think we're sort of saying the same thing of just making it clear to the team, is this a fully baked idea that you're going to go execute on, or this is something that we're talking about? I've found that I've had to get a lot more clear about that, because I will say something that I'm thinking about, that I'm thinking through, and I might be like 40% through my process of thinking it, and then a month later, the whole team's like, "Whoa, we're doing this, right? Like you said that in that meeting, and so now this is the direction we're going."
No.
I'm like, "Oh fuck, no, that was crazy." I realized that was a terrible idea. So you have to be very careful, Well, I am kind of curious, just because this is a little bit of a silly one, but you speak Spanish, right?
Yeah, I'm pretty rusty these days, though.
Do you speak any other languages?
No, I don't.
Gotcha. But you're a linguist. You enjoy languages.
I love language. Yeah.
If you could only learn one language other than Spanish, but then you couldn't learn any other ones for the rest of your life, but you could, by tomorrow, you could be fluent in one more language, what would it be?
Probably Urdu or Farsi.
Wow, really? Why?
The world's largest population lives in Asia. And like being able to communicate with that part of the world is, to me, like the biggest opportunity. I think Japanese is really beautiful, and there's all, other languages, of course, I'd love to learn. But as far as like what has the most breadth, I'd want the one that is non-romantic and like non-romantic language, and just brings me to a whole different part of the planet. When I travel, I tend to go stay in the Americas, because that's where I speak the language. The gift of being fluent is that you can go and you can really immerse yourself and you can be with the locals comfortably. I remember even being a little bit nervous. We went to Ireland in October. They speak English in Ireland. And even being nervous going there, I was like, man, because Irish is just like a very distinct language in and of itself, but then an Irish accent is a whole other language. But I was so nervous about it because I didn't feel like I could fully immerse myself the way that I wanted to. So to answer your question, I think either of those languages would be really a gift, because it would allow me to just,
Yeah, that makes sense.
Grow my world.
Yeah. I don't know what it would be, honestly. Actually,
do you speak any languages?
I speak Spanish, and I understand Italian because I speak Spanish. I mean, I spent a lot of time in Colombia, Mexico, Spain, and worked in Italy. But I forgot most of the Italian in terms of speaking. But if you spoke Italian to me, I would understand probably 80% of it. I think I would actually choose like Cantonese or Mandarin, because Farsi,
another good one,
I probably would be able to learn because there are a lot of similarities. At least there's some parallels, right? There's a lot of Spanish words that have Arabic influence, things like that. Cantonese Mandarin is like so foreign. I wouldn't even know where to start. So like knowing that, I think would be really interesting. Okay. I've been super geeking out on AI lately for myself personally.
Yeah, who hasn't?
It is every day I'm not sleeping, unfortunately, because literally I will get done with my Mies work around 11 p.m. or something. And then, I put the kids to bed, and then around 8, and then I go back to work. But then I'm just like up, and just have this whole new energy because there's so much that's changing. And I'm like building applications, using all these cool like things to just sort of, I love productivity and optimizing kind of time. So I don't have to like do anything that would be rote. And I'm just blown away at how fast this is all moving. And I'm really curious, forget Opus, the company for a minute, but you personally, if you're using AI at all for yourself, for anything that you do.
Yeah, probably nothing that would come as a surprise. I use Granola for note taking. I use Claude for like analysis, or honestly, like the biggest use case for Claude lately for me has been if somebody sends me a really long email and I don't have time to like sift through it, I'll throw it into Claude and be like, give me the top 3 bullet points from this email. And it's more just because of time. It's not because I don't want to read it. I'm like getting hundreds of emails.
Yeah.
And I want to respond to everything personally, but it becomes really overwhelming. So I don't find myself using anything that's like specialized, if that makes sense. It's a lot of like more of so not like a lot of generative AI or anything like that. It's just a lot more of the good basics. I switched off of ChatGPT a while ago because I think Claude is better at writing. I have an executive assistant, but even with like a great executive assistant,
Virtual
she's
or in person?
virtual, yeah, but she's not in every meeting. And
Yeah.
like sometimes it's just more productive to have a note taker.
Yeah.
That's AI driven. So, you can keep moving and she's more productive too. So she can focus on the things that I need her to focus on.
Yeah. Yeah.
Long gone are the days of assistants taking minutes,
No. I mean, I'm actually onboarding a new assistant, a virtual one. It's crazy the things that I will have this person do now because so much of my life is now automated with AI. Like so much of it.
Totally.
I mean, I use I use a bunch of tools, but I don't touch email anymore. I use Superhuman AI, but then on top of that, I use this thing called Lindy. All of my emails are categorized by different types of things, whether it's from internal investors, from team, if it's a newsletter, if it's da-da-da, and then things are automatically unsubscribed or automatically archived and then automatically drafts, sent to me and then I can approve them. Basically, like I rarely ever open my email now. And then the same thing on my, with meetings, there's obviously an AI note taker. And then any action item that comes out of that for me or someone else gets put into this. I use Coda and it sort of indexes all the action items I have. It reminds me of them. There's another AI I use that just reminds me every week and daily as well of important dates. So it's like, hey, next Saturday is your nephew's birthday. And it
Wait,
links
why
to
doesn't
like,
your calendar work for that? I'm curious.
my calendar's there, but basically what it does is it's sending me a note that says like, his birthday is on Saturday. Here's a card. You usually use early bird to send him money. Do you want me to send that? And it will just and I'll just write, here's the note I want to write, and like sends it for me. But the calendar is like, I don't have like everybody that I meet now. I'll try to pull like, hey, when's the birthday or something important date, and then I'll send them a text. Like, hey, happy birthday. Someone, it could be an acquaintance. Just like keeping up with people, and it could be a wedding anniversary. It could be obviously all the work anniversaries and things like that. It just reminds me of these because I want to make sure I'm always sort of like, just sending something nice whenever I can for somebody.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And there's some little things like that. It's crazy, like there's little knowledge bases you create, and then I will. It's all connected to my text now because I use Twilio tied to the AI. So I just text myself, or I don't even have to. Just like, hey Siri, send Lindy a note, and I say what it is. And it's wild what it can do. And,
but there's still though, and I've thought about this before I brought on a virtual assistant. I was like, do I really need this, or should I just optimize with AI? And like, here we are, you're still bringing on a virtual EA. So did I, because it gives them time and space to actually be strategic.
Yes.
And like find really thoughtful solutions. We still have like QA and data entry things that just need humans.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. I mean, that's the thing is like, yes, they can manage your email and things like that, but that's going away. Like especially now with these, you can create agents that are even better at this. Like it lets your assistant do way more high leverage things, and or just you don't have a resource for like for instance, we're pretty PLG, right? So we have thousands of people coming through trial and tour, and many of them will leave their Gmail account, and that's it, right? But they actually might be the director of culinary for this group or this group, and it's very difficult to get that information. So it's a great, it's not a great AI use case yet because there's too many places you have to go to find it. It's getting there. But even if it is, like my assistant can, in the beginning, just look through those emails and do the work, and then make that job now obsolete by finding the right solution that will automate it over time. And I think that's just going to keep happening. This is what I love about it is like I don't think it's jobs going away. It just is going to create
enhancement.
Yeah, if you had somebody who
I agree.
If everybody, spent part of their time, creating more things, creating more obsolete, things that they do because they find out how to do it with AI, they're just going to be able to do more things. You're going to have, people that are far more productive in their same role, and it might mean you not hire as many people, but I don't think it means you need to let people go.
Well, I don't know. I do disagree with that somewhat. I do think that like AI will replace some jobs because we're going to be more productive. If anything, I think the jobs that are like not in jeopardy are frontline jobs.
Well, that's for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Like guest facing roles. Yeah. But I think a lot of desk jobs are we'll kind of start to see more optimization. We're both in, you and I both run startups. Like we have found ways traditionally in a startup, 3 years ago, you might have to hire twice or thrice the amount of engineers that you need. But now we're in a place where our engineers are like so much more productive because of AI. And I don't think a lot of people realize that at this point in technology, like the size of your team is not the indicator of how productive you are. If anything, or like just how big it is. If anything, it's like, how small are you?
Yeah.
And how fast are you growing?
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, look, I think there's certainly jobs that are doing very, very routine desk things that are certainly going to be just completely solved with AI. But I do think that for as many of those that there are things that we don't even know that we haven't thought of yet that are new opportunities that are just going to make our businesses better. Now there might be more smaller startups as well, but there are things that we don't do because it would be absurd to have the resource to be able to do this thing that maybe now you can. And that person that used to process invoices or used to, whatever the thing that they did, maybe there's something even more interesting that they can do that's more prescriptive or more, however it can be creative to the business. So I'm optimistic. I do think that obviously, like, desk jobs are starting to get taken away, but it's fucking
I'm optimistic
exciting
too. Don't get me wrong, but I think like, when I think about, our whole world is thinking about frontline work. And that's kind of what I think about when I think about our AI. And what's funny, I'll get asked this a lot because, our core user on the admin side is a training manager. And people say like, aren't you afraid that your AI is going to replace training managers? I was like, they're already stretched thin. AI is not going to replace that training manager.
No, it's just going to make them better. It's going to allow them to do more and be more effective.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, this was a pleasure.
Always a pleasure.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me on.
I wish we could have done it in person, but we will catch up in person soon. You're still in New York all the time, right?
I'm still in New York, Brooklyn by day, or Manhattan by day, Brooklyn by night.
Gotcha. What's anything coming up in the pipeline we should know about?
Yeah. April 7th, Monday, task management is officially released at Opus, fully integrated with the training experience. Yeah. So
amazing. So that's like, how to clean the walk-in, how to set up your station, that kind of stuff.
AM checklists, store audits, you name it. But we've designed it in a way that's fully integrated with the training experience. So you can deploy corrective action.
Yep.
And it's just, customers are really excited about it. We're excited about it. And frankly, it's something I said no to for like 4 years because we wanted to get it right. So yeah, so big week next week.
It's great. Congrats.
Yeah. Thanks.